Freeman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
6:37 on the Morning Majority, and it is Major Garrett's first appearance on 105.9 FM. Welcome.
Yeah,
it's a heavy responsibility. Take it seriously, okay?
Yes, I am scared to death.
Now everyone knows what you really sound like,
Indeed.
Major.
I tremble.
So I wanted to start off with a little clarification because I'm getting mixed signals. So President has for quite some time wanted us to pass the bill now, the jobs bill.
Yes.
But there has been some confusion about whether there's even a bill introduced in the House and Senate. Where does that stand right now?
The bill exists. It's just not in the hopper, as we say. Someone has to file it. You have to file it
why
with the
wouldn't it
clerk.
be filed by now?
Well, the Senate Democrats have made clear, and Harry Reid made clear almost certainly the very next week after the president's big job speech, that he was in no hurry to introduce this. He was in no hurry for the Senate to get to this debate because he wanted to see how the president's sort of road show would affect the polls and the political attitudes in the country about the bill. He knows it's destined for certain filibuster defeat in the Senate, so the sooner he brings it up, the sooner that inevitable death occurs, and they want, on the Senate Democratic side for sure, to string that out. On the House Republican side, they have to persuade someone to bring it up at committee, and that hasn't happened yet. And they haven't. I don't believe there's a House co-sponsor of the bill yet. So it exists in legislative form. It's just not in the procedural form in the House or the Senate, to my knowledge.
And couldn't there be a Democrat in the House
who
just says, "Yeah, I'm going to sponsor this thing"?
Yeah,
okay.
it's sitting there waiting, ready, and available for anyone to file it. There's no great difficulty in filing a bill in either the House or the Senate. You just walk up to the clerk and submit it to them. Yes.
So does nobody want to be tied to it then on the Democratic side? I mean, where's their thinking on that?
Well, I think what they're doing is taking cues from the White House. And the White House has not pressured Harry Reid to move it along in the Senate. And so until that happens in the House, I think the House Democrats are like, well, we'll let the Senate take it up first because that's where we have a majority and a procedural advantage.
But
and until they do, what's the point on the House?
The president has said no less than 5,000 times, pass this bill, pass this bill now, pass this bill, pass this. We've played that litany 100 times. He said he everywhere he goes, you need to do it right away. You need to pass. How can you pass it if nobody will even pick up the bill and file the silly thing?
Right. I mean, it does become a bit comical, and
it's hilarious.
And honestly, the president knows better. I mean, remember, he is a constitutional expert. I was on the campaign for 14 months. I learned a lot.
But I love the air quotes. That was great. You didn't see that in radio. You little air quotes. He is the constitutional expert.
Yeah, that is a major part of the resume.
Every president proposes and every Congress disposes. Presidents can say pass this bill as many times as they want. It almost never happens the way a president introduces it. Now, look, I understand the president, for the first time in his presidency, has pride of authorship. This is the first time he's actually written a bill. Historically, as we all know, he's provided principles and framework and attitudinal sort of indicators about what he would like to have and leaves all the gritty details to Congress. That has sometimes worked to his advantage. It's sometimes worked to his disadvantage. In the main, it's frustrated Democrats throughout the process. So now he has a bill, but he doesn't have anyone who will file it yet.
Go ahead, please.
Well, we're not going to have a government shutdown.
No.
So who feels?
And it wasn't about disaster aid, I assure you.
What was it about then?
Well, if it was about disaster aid, there would have been a big meeting of the minds about what to do with disaster aid. In the end, what they agreed to do was exactly what the Budget Control Act, which resolved the debt ceiling, said we would have for FEMA, $2.65 billion. That was the agreed-upon number. That's always been the agreed-upon number. If it had been about disaster assistance, it would have been a much larger number with a much more immediate action. What it was really about was the administration protecting its green jobs grant programs, because the president did not want to establish any precedent at all that for disaster assistance any of his favorite programs could be nicked. And that's what was going to happen if you were going to put up $1.5 billion in the fiscal 2011 budget. So over this last weekend, the administration went to FEMA and said, look, whatever you have to do, eke by until Friday, the end of the fiscal year. Because if you don't, and if you shut down, then I'm going to have to spend money in this fiscal year, and the only way Republicans are going to spend it is if they offset it, and I don't want to accept the things they want to offset, which is federal grants for fuel-efficient vehicles and renewable energy technology. So, in the main, that was really what this was all about.
There are some reports out there on Real Clear Politics has written an analysis of this about how, if you look at the numbers, it does appear that the GOP is now poised to take the Senate. I mean, it's early. But look, there are 2 GOP toss-ups. Let's say they get one of those. The Republicans are currently favored to pick up 2 Democratic seats. That would be 3. That would put them at 51. Some people think that the total weight of the election and the dissatisfaction with the Democrats may actually have them pick up a couple of more of these seats. It could be anywhere between 51 or 53 seats. Do you agree with that assessment?
I have long thought that the odds dramatically favored Republicans taking over the Senate in this next cycle.
Do you think it will be bigger than the last election we just saw where Republicans picked up the House?
It feels to me like a continuation of that process. And in the Senate, the numbers could be larger because the number of seats are larger. And on the House side, Democrats still believe they can take a few seats away from Republicans. I don't actually see that. I think there is a possibility House Republicans could pick up a few seats, protect the ones they have. But I think it's a very difficult scenario if you're a Senate Democratic leadership or a campaign operative to look at the map and say, A, we can expand, or B, we can hold. I don't think they can do either one of those. Democratic
pollster Stan Greenberg has made an assessment of it, and he sent a memo around to other Democrats, and it's sugar-coated, as you would in a situation like that. When you really read what he's saying, it's pretty bleak for Democrats.
Well, and this sort of goes back to our original conversation. Why isn't anyone running the president's jobs bill up the flagpole? I mean, I waited the night of the job speech and the days afterward to see if there would be a single Senate Democrat up in 2012 who would even endorse it, say something complimentary about it. I still am waiting.
Wow.
Claire McCaskill in Missouri is not running on it. John Tester's not running on it in Montana. Bill Nelson's not running on it in Florida. They're not killing it. They're not denouncing it. They're not attacking it, but they're not embracing it.
It's because they know it's not a serious piece of legislation.
Well, I think they believe, and I'm sure their internal polls indicate that it is at best a mixed bag politically for them, and they're not interested right now in mixed bag issues.
Stick around for a few minutes while I get into the super committee.
Of course.
And maybe even Chris Christie.
Sure.
Major Garrett from National Journal here with us with the Morning Majority. Major Garrett from National Journal's in studio. So there was a report this morning that the super committee was making some progress. Are you hearing the same thing on that, or is it just way too early to determine whether or not they're actually
The super committee will make progress until it stops making progress. It will never report publicly that it's not making progress.
They'll just say, everything's going fine here.
Look, and I have not been bird-dogging the super committee for the last 2 weeks. We have other people in National Journal who do that. I'm checking in with it periodically, but it will always report progress. Every budget talk I've ever covered in Washington always reports progress until it either produces something or falls apart at the end. With the market volatility such as it is, the super committee will never say it's deadlocked until it's absolutely deadlocked, and they have no choice but to announce that. So,
is there any chance that this thing could actually get done before the deadline, or are we going to be at the last?
No,
second?
I actually believe that there's a possibility that they'll look at the deadline and ask the congressional leadership to change the deadline and push them into next year.
Oh, really?
I think it's possible.
I don't know. I do think though that
we're making so much. We're almost there. We just need a little bit more time.
Right.
I think you always have to keep that in the back of your mind.
I mean, you're right about budget talks. They'll always report, but I mean, they really have clamped down. I mean, nothing is leaking out at all on this. Are you surprised?
No, and the only way this super committee can function is if there is a cone of silence. And yes, to some that might bespeak seriousness. I just think the embedded political realities are the same across the Capitol. And the policy difficulties are the same, whether it's a Ways and Means Committee and a Finance Committee operating in publicly or a 12-member super committee operating in secretly. The politics and the policy are still fundamentally difficult. That doesn't change, and I think that's why it's a very, very tough mountain for them to climb.
Great to have you, and as always, we appreciate it.
My pleasure.